Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Planning Commission podcast. Today's episode, I am planner. Hear me roar with Amy Stelly, planner and designer from New Orleans, Louisiana.
The Planning Commission podcast is a spirited discussion with myself and a couple of my longtime colleagues in the profession. Our discussions are based solely on our own opinions and do not reflect the opinions or views of our employers, the American Planning Association, or even our alma maters. So grab a seat in the back of City Hall, dig out an old copy of Robert's Rules, and for goodness sakes, read your packet. The Planning Commission is now in session.
All right, let's start off with our roll call. Commissioner Smith.
Present.
And Commissioner Kostelik.
I'm pretty much here, but maybe a little spacey today. We'll see.
All right. Well, and Commissioner Smith, it ought to be noted, is recording today from Switzerland. And I was thinking about this yesterday. You have recorded from Orlando, Anchorage, I think Palm Desert, Fresno, Palm Springs, Palm Desert,
Sacramento,
Mexico.
Yes.
And now Switzerland. Am I missing anyone? God, I have a lame life. I got to get out.
This is your first time recording in neutral territory.
That's right.
Also,
indulging in that chocolate. Uh-oh. Well, we've got some technical issues.
And I'm recording from one of the safest places in the world. I was just saying that I'm recording in one of the safest places in the world, and it is an incredible transportation nerddom to be in. I mean, I've been in these small, I'm in these little bitty cities. I'm near Solothurn, Switzerland, and which that's considered a dangerous city. The crime rate is high. And I was like, what's the crime here? And they're like, there's some theft, some little pickpocketing. I'm like,
we have people that do 27 in a 25 zone.
Right.
Yeah. Leaving the Swiss chocolate to melt.
But no one's getting hit on the road, and
there you go.
It's really beautiful. It's been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
I bet it is. All right. So our agenda today, our discussion item, our whiskey pairing, our interview with Amy Stelly, and the lightning round. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
All right. Second, somewhere from Switzerland. It's the delay.
Right here.
There we go. Okay. As a reminder to our listeners, hit up our website, www.theplanningcommissionpodcast.com. Go to our YouTube site, Amazon, Apple, Spotify, and Deezer. Give us a like, leave us some feedback. We love your input. Email us all the things we ask you to do. We appreciate everything that you're doing on your end, and we're going to keep doing our thing. We appreciate all of what's happening with this podcast, and thank you very much for your help. All right, commissioners, our discussion item. Here's my question to you. Today, we have just an amazing human being who is an inspiration to all of us, and I'm so excited to have her on in just a few minutes. But I want to ask you first, what planning approaches or policies have been historically employed that you would change? Think about that. Our profession has been around in this country for quite some time in one way or another. We've done a lot of good things and maybe a lot of not so good things, right? Any thoughts on that? I got one. I'm going to hit it hard, but go ahead.
I would, given today's topic, I would put major highway projects and transportation investments through the same zoning process of land use approval. They are essentially land use and land development projects, and we should be able to determine if this is the mixed-use walkable town center of a project or the Walmart of a highway. There's mine.
That's a good one. That is a good one. I saw something recently that talked about that very thing about, why don't we look at highways as land use and as opposed to something separate? And it's a good question. So,
and I remember one of our colleagues that we've known for a long time here in the Boise area, Patricia Nilsson. I mean, it was one of her ideas for even just forget all the other stuff with roads and highways, but why couldn't we, for corridor preservation purposes, if we knew we needed 80 feet of right of way, zone it for that and essentially that land is there. And I'm sure that's very much oversimplified from a legal perspective. But again, just following along that line, if we look at that acreage that a state DOT owns within a city,
Oh,
they're probably one
gosh.
of the
Yeah.
largest landowners. So why
Yeah.
wouldn't they be
Yeah.
subject to
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no doubt. Jess, you got one?
Well, your original question was what would you do away with, right?
Yeah,
From a
change.
planning
There's something that we've
perspective.
been using, whatever it might be. And
Oof.
there's obviously that's a big Easter egg basket, right?
Yeah, and I'm gonna go with comprehensive plans.
No,
I
okay.
I I think we should get rid of them, and I know that there's a lot of there are some good comp plans out there. I'm not saying we can't do it well, right, but I think that we never have the budget or the time.
Yeah, Switzerland. Gotta get caught up on the technology while she's figuring that out. I'll push forward. So what I'm gonna say is, I think yes, there's certainly some obvious ones that we have. I mean, like the things like obviously redlining has been a subject. It's been talked about quite a bit, and I would hope that there isn't a planner out there who wouldn't agree that that's a pretty fundamental thing. So I'm gonna go with a little less obvious, and Don knows this particular part of my bane. Oh my God. I'm getting rid of drive-throughs. That's all there is to it. I'm getting rid of drive-throughs. And the reason is because, man, I just feel like once we open that Pandora's box, we have opened up a culture across the country from coast to coast, right? Of unfortunately sitting in our car way more, not just gotta get out and burn a calorie, man. And just all the implications, the land use, the underutilization of land that I think has come from that, really. And we deal with it on P&Z, not as often as maybe we once did. But man, we still do deal with it. And then I love when you see one shopping center wanting 2 drive-throughs and you see the queues overlapping in the designs and you're going, what are we doing? Come on, man.
I think that's gotten worse in the last 15, 20 years because of the proliferation of all these different coffee shops and stuff. I think when it was just normally your typical fast food restaurant, the queues there for whatever market reasons were a lot less. Now Chick-fil-A and In-N-Out Burger have, thrown the book out on some of those things. But yeah, imagine being the person trying to design the elaborate maze of drive-through queues to keep it out of roads and other stuff, and the wasted effort that goes.
Yeah. Well, and I'll, not to pick on anyone, but I'll just say our largest coffee or company in our country with drive-throughs, like, well, we're going to ban the straw. Okay, great, for environmental reasons, but we got to have a drive-through with 300 people in an hour sitting there idling. You tell me which one has a bigger environmental effect, right? Like, come on, that's
And I think some of McDonald's food has more plastic in the food than comes in the packaging and stuff too. I mean, that's is the stuff they make yoga mats out of that's in the McRibs?
Yeah, I love those images. I bought this hamburger 35 years ago and kept it. Like, first of all, why did you keep it? But then they show you.
No, my grandfather did that. He bought a McDonald's double cheeseburger and he put it in the toolbox in the back of his pickup truck. And this is in the South, so it's hot and humid. And 5 years later, there was no mold on the cheese. No bugs had gotten into it. It just looked like a smaller, dried up version of itself. But what does it say about the nutritional value of something if bugs and mold won't get into it?
Even if they're not getting into it. All right. Well, on that lovely note, let's turn our page to the whiskey pairing. And we're actually going to throw our listeners a curveball because Amy Stelly, who's going to join us now, gave us an idea for the whiskey pairing. And most of the time we kind of take this upon ourselves and such, but this one was so good, we wanted to have Amy on a little bit early. So first of all, Amy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, man. So I'm going to turn it over to you and Don. Don, why don't you set it up and then we'll let Amy go to town on the recommendation that she made.
Well, no, we do appreciate when guests have their own pairings. It doesn't always have to be whiskey. So if you're a future guest, any type of spirit will do. And if you've listened, we've deviated from that. But Amy being from New Orleans had a distillery there. So we'll hand it off to you to describe which one it is and the importance of it, and we'll go from there.
Well, thank you. Well, my choice for pairing is 7-3 Distillery's Irish Channel whiskey.
Mm.
And to begin with, 7-3 Distillery sits in the Claiborne corridor and it faces the interstate. So they're my neighbors. And I couldn't exactly talk about whiskey and not talk about the whiskey that my neighbors make. So we're very happy to have them there. Speaking of zoning, the Claiborne corridor has 10 zoning districts laid over it, over like a 2-mile area. So it's a lot going on. But one of the things that we're fortunate to have is small pockets of industrial, and that's where 7-3 Distillery has located. So we're really happy they have quite a presence on the corridor. In terms of the Irish Channel whiskey, Irish Channel is a neighborhood. Yeah, it's coming up. The Irish Channel is a neighborhood in New Orleans. It's in uptown New Orleans, right up against the river. And New Orleans has quite an immigrant population. I don't know if folks really realize that, but we have a huge Irish population that's been here for generations. And they, like others, worked on the waterfront. So in terms of the whiskey itself, it's very, very light, very light. And if it had been heavier, I think in the summertime in New Orleans, we'd just pass out. Right?
Nothing would have gotten built, right?
Nothing.
Perfect.
Well, I've not had just a New Orleans fix in a long time, so I need to do that, and this might be inspiration for it. But just the cocktail history of New Orleans with the Sazerac and the Vieux Carré, as well as just really bourbon being essentially discovered or founded because Elijah Craig was charring the inside of pickle barrels to get rid of the pickle flavor, putting whiskey in it and shipping it down the Ohio to New Orleans. And people were drinking it like, wow, what is this? This tastes different. And he created the aging process without knowing he had done it. So that's the center point that New Orleans has in the American spirits industry. So great to have a local one.
Yeah. Well, when you come, you should come for a tale of the cocktails. So it's a culinary tour, if you will, of beverages. So if you're a spirits drinker, I think you will enjoy tales.
Put that on the
cocktails.
list.
Yes, you should.
The Planning Commission podcast is brought to you with support from our friends at planetizen.com. In addition to offering the daily planning news that we at the Planning Commission podcast have relied on for years, Planetizen also offers a whole library of online courses made by and for planners. In fact, the Planning Commission podcast is happy to offer our listeners an exclusive 10% discount on a Planetizen course subscription. Go to courses.planetizen.com/PC10 to get access to more than 300 essential planning courses today.
All right. Well, with that, I want to first, before we get into knowing more about Amy, I need to, for our listeners and viewers, to set the stage, because I want you to understand how this episode came about. So late one night, I'm flipping channels, just, doing my thing, and I stumble upon PBS. And as many of you know, PBS does have a lot of good shows, on planning once in a while, various related things on planning. And I heard the gentleman, the host, talk about, I think it was something like the 3-minute story or whatever they called it, about a highway in New Orleans. And I thought, well, gosh, right, I got to listen to this. And the next thing I know, I am watching the story of one person who is changing a major American city, and started, I think, on her own and grew a major coalition to do something that I'm aware of, just given that what we do as planners and the history of the interstate system and some of the segments coming off of the interstate and so on. And I just could not believe what I was watching. So the very next day, that night, I looked you up. You don't even know this. I looked you up, found your website, which we will post for our viewers to go check out themselves. And there was your number and everything. And the next day I called you and you just answered the phone, hello. And I thought, wow, what a small world we live in, right? And we had a great conversation and here you are. So Amy, thank you so very much for taking the time. I can't wait for our listeners to hear your story. So I'm going to shut up and stop, worshiping at your feet for a minute and just let them know who you are. So tell us who you are, your background, and what the heck happened with this whole story. And then we want to know a whole lot more about you.
Okay. So for those of you who haven't met me yet, either by news or small but beautiful episodes like Brief but Spectacular. And I have to tell you, Chris, that is my favorite piece. I usually don't look at things that have been written about me. I kind of let it go because I don't buy into all of the stuff that comes with that. But that PBS piece is so beautifully produced and it tells the story actually very well. So I grew up in the shadow of I-10. I live 450 feet from the main deck. I-10 is an elevated expressway in New Orleans, and about 150 feet from the ramp that takes everybody to the French Quarter. So the highway brings people through the neighborhood. Needless to say, when they get off to go into the French Quarter, they don't stop. They just keep going to the French Quarter where they can do all kinds of fun things. So growing up in the shadow of the highway, I never liked it. It was always very dirty. As an adult, I'm much more aware of the noise that exists in the corridor pretty much 24 hours. On some days, it's very, very noisy. And I just decided as a kid that I didn't like it. It was ugly and it needed to come down. And I remember promising myself that when I grew up and learned enough to take it down, I would just do it. So fast forward to 2012, I returned to New Orleans after living in Florida for many years, which is really where I cut my teeth on planning. I'm trained as an architect, but actually took a job in planning, apologies, West Palm Beach, because I hated the architecture there and didn't want to work for any of the firms. The extruded Mediterranean stuff just didn't turn me on. So I saw an ad in the paper for an urban designer for the city of West Palm Beach and decided I would apply because it would exercise a muscle that was different from building design, very, very different. And I applied. I was pretty honest in my interview. I got some real interesting questions from the principal planner there. And I decided that if they could appreciate my honest answers, and it was just kind of general stuff, about being managed and what would you do if, my favorite question was, what would you do if you took a position and your supervisor took a different one and it turned out you were right? And then I just answered honestly. I said, I would try not to gloat. And with that, the principal planner hired me.
Try being the emphasized word,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
No guarantees.
I don't know if I could do it. And that time came very quickly. Yeah, came very quickly. So I learned a lot in West Palm, but in 2012, got the opportunity to move back home. And one of the first things that happened was there was an implosion of a residential structure that was right up against the highway in the central business district. It was designed as residential apartments and it never worked. So it became a city hotel. The police were always called. It was just really nasty, dirty. So they decided that it should be gone. And I went to see the implosion. It was one of the greatest days of my life because I suggested that my cousins stay there when they visited New Orleans from California. And one night I got a call from my cousin screaming, saying to please get her out of the place because it was so horrible that she was afraid for her life. So when the building was destroyed, I was very happy. One of the reporters covering the story put the mic in my face and said, are you happy about this? I said, yes, I'm very happy. And that highway is the next thing to go. So I put it out there. And of course, people were like, you're crazy. But the advocacy stayed dormant until the city decided that they were going to build a retail market under the highway. And I thought, no,
No.
you're not going to do it. It's going to be a failure. And I lived so close to the deck that as soon as I would go out, I would see the failure, the absolute planning failure that the city was about to create. So I went to a community meeting, found like-minded individuals there, and really that's how the coalition was born. You know, it was born out of protest.
And if folks haven't seen this setting, I mean, and you can, is it the neutral areas? What are the medians in New Orleans called?
We call them the neutral grounds.
Neutral grounds. Yeah.
Yes.
So this had a neutral ground, big, large median on a residential street. That's where they put the expressway. And if you go down the surface street today, you have literally one-story homes looking straight up at this structure.
Yes. And you know what's worse, in the solid residential core of the 7th Ward, which most people don't see, that's sort of a hidden part of the corridor. The highway is built so close to the houses that the deck looks like it's sitting on the roof of some, because I've photographed it a million times. So it's actually closer to the residential structures in other parts of the city, which is horrible. It's terrible.
So tell us a little bit about, you know, you talked about these first couple of discussions and stuff that you were wanting to have, and those early days. I got to know, when you started talking to people about removing this huge piece of infrastructure, right?
Yes.
What were those conversations like, and how were they reacting to you? And who was it that you felt like was starting to understand it and start to go, yeah, we're with you?
Right. Well, of course, I got more "you're crazies" than not, because who removes the highway? But more people responded with, "it will never happen. They'll never do it. We can't get rid of it. We're stuck with it." So I started to get those kinds of responses. We have to live with it. All of the apathy that comes with having to live in a very depressed and oppressive environment, because we do live in a city, unfortunately, in New Orleans, where retaliation is a thing. And if you step out, then you suffer the retaliation from the political class. So even though there are people here who want it gone and who have wanted it gone ever since I started to advocate for removal, they are definitely afraid to say so. So I hear more, "can't we just live with" now? And I consistently say, no, we can't live with it. And we shouldn't have to live with it. So I'm still a little crazy, but not as crazy as I was maybe 2 years ago.
How does it make you feel when I mean, we've definitely started a greater dialogue as a country about the harm and what these highways did to neighborhoods. How does it make you feel, just with your experience growing up there, when you hear the people say, no, that's not why they were built, or try to deny that these highways and things had the purpose that they did in the neighborhoods that they did?
Well, you know, the inclination is to want to educate people, but some people don't want to be educated these days. So when I hear it, I try to tactfully respond to people, especially on social media, because I'm not going to get into any social media fights. That's really where I get that kind of reaction more than any. I just try to tactfully explain to people, depending on which piece of the argument we're debating about, I'll say. So sometimes it might be about redlining, you know, and I will say redlining is real, and this is why, you know, and the results of it are still with us. So I really try to be tactful. Unlike others on social media, I don't try to take people down because they disagree with me.
Yeah.
And what I've done really lately is invite them to come and work with me because we want the naysayers. So I always or usually end those kinds of exchanges with an offer to work with those people. They don't usually say, okay, we'll do it.
So I'm curious, kind of in those. Well, let me back up. How long ago do you suppose really truly began this fight, roughly?
I think the fight began in earnest in about 2017,
Oh, so
actually,
not that
because
long
that's
ago.
really
Okay.
not that long ago. So I would talk about it, but I never really got any traction.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the city's plan to actually develop under the highway is really, really what motivated me, because I found like-minded individuals. And then I really became like desperate for the next thing to stave off this horrible development. So I wrote an open letter to our mayor, our then mayor, who is now our infrastructure czar, Mitch Landrieu, saying, don't do it. It's a bad idea. Don't bring it to the neighborhood, because you wouldn't put it in your neighborhood. Needless to say, he didn't like the letter, but that's okay. What happened was he didn't show up to do the ribbon cutting that was planned, because it was supposed to be a big 300th anniversary thing where they displayed the demonstration project, and they built something that was substandard to begin with. So I photographed it and I was like, you can't have a demonstration project where the electrical cords are going through water. That's not going to work. So it was just with, continued observation and kind of putting it out there very publicly that this thing just took a rest for a minute, but it's trying to rear its ugly head again, because the DOT gave the city and the state $500,000 to try to execute their plan. They had a budget of $95 million to take the ramps down, but the DOT, in its infinite wisdom, knocked them down to a planning grant, which I think is a pretty significant statement of $500,000. Now they did apply in competition with community, because we had a community application which said exactly what the DOT has said to them. We need to plan and take into account current conditions. So I guess the city will do that, and the state, but we're going to move forward with our work to continue to assess the conditions, particularly in the realm of public health.
So I'm guessing as you've gone through this journey, you've tried to frame arguments that come from a whole variety of perspectives, and so I'm curious, and you mentioned a little bit of this already, unfortunately, this notion of sort of blowback, if you will, for anybody who might speak in a way that others don't, see or think of so fondly. But were there parties or entities that, as you were talking about these things, sort of surprised you in terms of either their support or opposition, that they kind of came out and you thought, oh my gosh, I didn't expect that?
Yes, children.
Oh.
In fact, you'll have to pardon my appearance. I was out doing a field day with a group of high schoolers this morning. So one of the things that has evolved out of my partnership with LSU School of Public Health is that we take folks to the highway corridor and have them measure air quality, do lead testing. So they begin to look at the public health metrics. So today we were out with a charter school, and the students there were actually, I left them on the Greenway because I had to get back for our program. But they were actually taking lead samples, and children, what we kind of learned through the process, come to their own conclusions about the highway, but they're the correct conclusions about the highway. And what I have found is the politicians and the adults are less likely to argue with the kids, because their findings they come about quite honestly, right? They're not jaded like adults. So actually, they're our biggest secret weapon. So I appreciate, the actual support and honest response to the highway that the kids are delivering. And this class is actually going to, it's a science class, environmental science class, but they're going to dip their feet into the design and land use world. So I'm very interested to see what they come up with. And I am going to begin, we started this with our first elementary school class of publishing the kids' work on the Alliance website. I'm getting more and more from students. So as I get things that are noteworthy, because I can't put everything up, we're going to put it on the Alliance. But we've worked with first graders on up to graduate students at Harvard School of Design. So we have quite a range of what would I call it? Acolytes.
Well, I love that you're tying those themes together, because as Chris and I have done health impact assessments on, a variety of projects over the last decade. And what's interesting, one of the pieces of research I keep coming across, and this has been confirmed in the US, in Australia, in Europe, is that kids who grow up next to busy highways have asthma and COPD rates the same as kids that grow up in secondhand smoke households. And I just,
wow,
so to think of you guys collecting that data out there, knowing that it's to benefit both them and even generations beyond them, I think is fantastic. And it's led me to joke that, well, if that's what living next to a highway does, shouldn't we put warning labels on these highways like we do with cigarettes, because it's having the same effect out there, and that's something we just don't capture. So Jess, are you back online enough to chime in?
Yeah, I'm here, and I hope it's coming through okay. Okay, good. We're having a really crazy windstorm here, and it's apparently affecting the internet. Anyway, but hey, Amy, what I was thinking about is, have you toured or maybe researched other places where highways have been removed? And then, like, what were your impressions of those communities? How did they change or not change?
Right. Well, my first tour, and really only tour that was specifically about highways, was actually to San Francisco to look at the transition. That's probably one of the most famous ones outside of the Big Dig in Boston. But just to see how San Francisco was transformed with the Embarcadero, the removal of it. And I was actually surprised. My cousin was kind enough to accompany me to San Francisco, which she hates because she hates hills. She lives in Sacramento, so it's flat. But she was brave enough to actually navigate the hills of San Francisco with me. And we visited some places in that neighborhood so that I could begin to see what things looked like. Now, I went to San Francisco as a kid, but of course, when you go with your parents, they're not going to, they'll drive you along the highway. They're not going to take you to look at it. But I was very happy to see the transformation in San Francisco.
That's awesome.
So what do you, when the bulldozers hit and things are healed, what do you expect that to look like? If we close our eyes and dream of visiting that corridor in, say, 10 years, 15 years, what do you see there?
Well, in 10 years, I hope that we can begin to have the canopy replaced, right? Because that's what people loved about the corridor. And the median or neutral ground is 100 feet wide. So we have ample space to actually regrow the urban forest. And one of the folks on our team is a landscape architect who has a PhD in urban forestry. So I'm grateful to have this level of expertise on our team. So I think that's the first thing people are going to see. But what we really want to work on in the sort of background, because it takes things like property acquisition, is really growing, reestablishing that Black Wall Street, because Claiborne was a Black Wall Street. It was predominantly Black businesses, but in the corridor, there were Black-owned businesses, Jewish-owned businesses, and Italian-owned businesses, because we have actually a very large Italian or Sicilian
Hmm.
population here. So it was really a gumbo, if you will, but those who were served by the corridor were Black people. So everybody wants to see that aspect of the corridor come back. And we've got some ideas about how to link culture with businesses here and actually take things like the farm to table concept, but apply it to things like, starting ostrich farms so that the Black Indians can get the plumes for the beautiful costumes that they make, because they're suffering under the weight of having to import ostrich plumes from South Africa through China, through New York, down to New
Goodness.
Orleans. Yeah, the supply is too long, but we can actually raise ostrich in Southern Louisiana. And there were farms here, they were raised for meat at one point, and that didn't go over well, but we can certainly raise them for the feathers, which we don't have to kill them to get the feathers. So
you bring
that
up a
is
point
a
too.
big thing.
Oh, that'd be cool. I remember the ostrich fillet craze and thing. I think it was pretty good. So bringing that back. You hit on a good point that I think once you get into it, people get this of what happened with urban renewal and putting highways where we did. But the point of it really taking out the Black Wall Street or the Black Main Street in a lot of cities, or I lived in Asheville, North Carolina, it was the same thing. And really aimed at not just what we would say neighborhoods that I think people tend to think of housing and where people live, but really the economic heart of sectors of cities where Black and other minority populations lived. I mean, that just cannot be stressed enough to understand. It wasn't just houses, it was the economic engine of these places.
The other thing that we don't think of, because people don't seem to think that everything in a city is connected, but when you gut the economy of the Black population, the way it was done in Tulsa, the way it was done in New Orleans, you also gut the economic health of the metropolitan population. So this is a body. If one part of the spine is bad, then your whole back is out of whack. We know that if you ever injured your back. So when the decisions are made to kill a part of the economy, you're not only just killing that little segment, you're killing something bigger. You're impacting something bigger. So I would hope that people would wake up and understand that the restoration of these pieces of the economy is healthy for the whole city. It's healthy for all cities. You can't just have one broken piece and think everything else is going to work. A broken toy is a broken toy.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of things that you just said to sort of unpack there. One, I'm going to hit back on what you mentioned a few minutes ago. And I think a lesson learned for me, I will say, is something that you just touched on, and that is the inclusion of children in planning. And I don't think we think about that as much as we ought to. And it's ironic, right? We're planning ahead.
Yes.
we are planning for the future. And as cliche as it sounds, right? Like Whitney Houston said it best, right? I believe that children are our future. Right?
Yes.
But she's right. And we've tried to do that when we can and have kids be part of it. And it's amazing their takes on stuff and their, and the feedback that they give you. And it sucks because I think the problem is the elected officials look at them and often say, well, they don't vote. So and you're like, whoa, that's such a short-sighted perspective, right? And so the other thing I was gonna say is when Dawn asked you to paint a picture of what a post-highway environment looks like, ostrich farming is exactly what I thought you would say. I mean,
really?
100%. I'm like, it's gonna be that. I'm gonna put my money on that.
Put them on the neutral ground, get them on the thing. It's probably going to be more efficient than a trolley there from a transportation standpoint.
Hey, man,
so we've got,
right.
Well, actually, we're looking at more of a regional approach because the person who is willing to do this lives upriver in Napoleonville, Louisiana. She has farmland, so we can actually really do the farm to table concept. But
Yeah.
I have a trick up my sleeve for these politicians who think kids don't count. Because we have to engage our city council in order to get this done. You have to have the city on board. And fortunately, the city's health department now wants to partner with us. But, you know, there are schools in the corridor. And what folks don't realize is there are children who have to cross Claiborne to get to school, and they have to cross in front of a ramp. The charter school system now is feeling the pinch of having to provide transportation. So they're cutting out bus service for middle school kids, which means that these kids are going to be across the Claiborne. So my big plan is to have the middle schoolers engage the elected officials by building them periscopes. I saw this yesterday and I thought, we've got to do this. Periscopes that actually change your point of view, and it makes you see the world from the height of a child. And I think we should walk them through the corridor so that they can see what children see, particularly in the homeless encampments that are under the highway, because those things have to be scary if you're a child passing them, but more importantly, if you're a child living in the encampment. So what does that look like? And I'm hoping that that will enlighten our elected officials. And the children will extend the invitation because they'll tell me no, but they can't say no to the kids.
Yeah. Well, let us, tell our audience, where do things stand now? Where are we in this process? My understanding, it was called out by name in the last transportation bill, if I'm not mistaken. And so that has to be incredibly exciting for you, but give us a sense of where things stand.
Well, it is incredibly exciting. So I would hope that the president would come and visit us one day. He's visited New Orleans, but not the corridor that I know of. But this is where things stand. So the city and the state have been charged by the DOT with coming up with some sort of plan. We don't know what that's going to be. But in the meantime, the Claiborne Avenue Alliance Design Studio was fortunate enough to be named as the subrecipient of a grant that went to LSU School of Public Health for air monitoring. So we're going to do what we were doing earlier today and monitor the air quality, the noise, lead. There's a lot of lead in the corridor because even though Katrina washed away some of the soil, we still have the highway, which contributes to the amount of lead in the soil. So we're going to take the public health measurements and then say what we already know. This is a toxic environment, therefore the highway should be removed. But from a planning perspective, this is our recommendation and this is why. So we will look at things like traffic. We will look at things like economics, tax disparity, things that people are very, very worried about as we talk about transitioning the corridor. So the EPA will give us the wherewithal to do a piece of our work, to actually collect the science, collect the data, quantify it, have it certified. So we're going to leave this process with data that's been certified by the EPA, and then recommendations on how we should move forward. And I know that to many people, adding the planning component seems like a little weird. But that, number one, that's what I am, so we do have to do it, but we also can't go into, or I won't go into another community meeting to talk to people about removal without being able to talk about things like traffic very intelligently, or the economics of the situation very intelligently, because people here are really afraid of the transition. So we need that, I almost want to call it peripheral, but it's not really. It's really the foundation of our opinion, because we have to say something and say why, and this is how you can do it. So that's the next thing, and we are going to start that work in a month. But really today, our field day was kind of the kickoff for me and my research partner at LSU School of Public Health. There were about 40 kids out there taking samples and collecting data. And that is data that is live and real and very useful. And 40 people collecting data at once, you can't beat that.
That's
so
very
we
different than
started.
that's very different than the field trip to the zoo or the aquarium or the usual things that happen, right? That's such a great connection to their own environment.
Oh my
Yes,
gosh.
and it impacts the kids, because I recently got a paper from one of the kids from this school that has gone on to Bard, and he has used the Claiborne Expressway to mount a conversation about Algeria. So it's really interesting,
Wow.
you know, how this is really affecting the students. They do leave with something, so that's a good thing.
That's
Yeah, and I
amazing.
mean, if you just look at and examine the freeway routing throughout New Orleans, it is, it's kind of always there. It's not like this segment is the only
Right.
piece of that. So carrying that across the river and other things must
Right.
be fantastic.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. So I have one more question for you, Amy. And what I want to know is, what do you want to say to decision makers who are in positions to help communities like yours who might be listening to us right now?
Definitely listen to the people, but in your decision making, you really have to put people first. And we have to stop operating according to the whims and wishes of the special interest groups. And we are seeing that here in New Orleans with things like short-term rentals. So for all public officials, you really have to put people in neighborhoods first. And when things become people-centered and neighborhood-centered, we will begin to see better outcomes. So that is what I would ask our public officials. And don't be afraid to come into the community. You know, we're not aliens, and actually all of them used to live in community at one time. So it doesn't hurt to get out and actually walk the neighborhoods with the people and experience what they experience. Get out of the ivory tower.
Yeah.
Thank you for using the word people. It's a word that we forget to use in all of our planning documents. And it's very, very important. Okay. I think we're going to start on something else. Chris, what do we got next?
Well, and just to quick summarize another lesson I think that you just taught our audience, and we've tried to impress upon people too real quick. And that is, you know, oh my gosh, if nothing else, for the love, go walk. Go walk the community, get out there, get out of the consulting office, just, you know, get out and feel it, right? Understand what you're talking about when you're planning for that very thing. And if you're a decision maker, whether you're a planning director, a council member, oddly enough, as a P&Z member, I'm barred from going out and looking at something firsthand, by the way.
Because that makes sense.
Well, because it might leave an impression on me that's unfair. So anyway, but the broader picture of just sort of just absorb it, right, as much as you can, because you can't learn that stuff from Google Earth. You can't.
No.
Right. So anyway. No. All right, Amy, we're going to transition to something a little bit fun, just pepper you in the lightning round and see what comes of this. So I'm going to start off with a couple quick questions for you. Hopefully you're ready.
Okay.
Worst humidity, West Palm Beach or New Orleans?
New Orleans by far.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Favorite flavored hurricane?
Oh, the original.
Oh, the original. I didn't know there was, wait, I didn't know there was an original flavor. I'm not from the area. So what is the original flavor?
I didn't know that there were other flavors. So we have a fruit punch.
Either. I don't understand your question, Chris.
Okay. When I have, here's my, I will reveal.
You've been at Hard Rock Cafe, Chris. Is that where you think you're getting cultured? Or?
I will reveal my naivete. I have been to New Orleans, but walking down Bourbon Street, as my impression was all the rotating drums of 10 different flavors of hurricane.
Those are daiquiris.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a different, we love our alcohol here.
I just revealed myself to be an idiot. So let me ask the question then. What is your favorite flavored daiquiri? How about that?
Oh, my favorite flavor daiquiri. The one that just pops into mind, because I don't drink them very often, would be pina colada. Tastes
There
like
you
a
go.
pina
There you
colada.
go.
Oh yeah.
My
But-
apologies to all of
but
the greater New
almost-
Orleans area.
Almost any flavor that doesn't sound too weird. Like I wouldn't want like a bubblegum daiquiri or something.
Ugh, no.
All blue. Wouldn't be my choice.
No, no. Okay, I have a question for you. So if you had a choice between two superpowers, being invisible or being able to
Ooh.
fly, which one would you choose?
Ooh, in New Orleans, being invisible.
Yes, it's always my favorite.
So I
That'd
could
read
listen to
minds.
all of those conversations I'm not supposed to hear.
Or I was thinking,
In
so you
all of
can.
those political offices.
I want to know. I am nosy like that too. I feel like it's just data collection, right?
Exactly.
My other question is what was the last gift you gave to someone?
Ooh. The last gift that I gave to someone would be my husband a set of cufflinks with an LSU
Oh.
Tiger because he
Of
recently
course.
joined the faculty of LSU.
There
Of
you go.
course. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Very classy.
Yeah.
I like it.
When the
Yeah.
highway comes down, you could take little chunks of concrete and make
I
those into
know.
cufflinks, sell
Ooh,
them
yeah.
all.
That's a good
As a way
idea.
to celebrate. There you
I
go.
was
Yeah.
I was
I'll
in
keep a chunk.
Seattle when they were tearing down the Alaska Way viaduct, and there was a little concrete piece of it that had gotten outside of the work yard, and I got a souvenir from that. So I was
Actually, you know what I just saw, and I can't pick it up, and I wish I could, but we're repairing actually the drainage system in New Orleans. And one of the unfortunate things is that the contractors are taking out the granite curbing.
Yeah.
So it's
Oh.
all over the street. And I'm wondering if I can commandeer a few slabs from around the corner.
no, that
I
would
would
be
love to
great.
have that. They're
That would be
beautiful.
great.
Yeah.
If you could only have one Louisiana made hot sauce the rest of your life, which one would you pick?
Mm, man.
Ooh. Maybe Tabasco. Crystal has a little bit of a vinegar edge to it, but I'm a hot sauce person, so I love you all hot sauces in Louisiana, so don't be
they're
mad
all
if you
good.
pick-
So all right,
pick
it's
Tabasco.
good to
In New Iberia. I have to. My husband's from that part of the state. I'll justify it that way.
excellent. Well, I mean, I was thinking back on the invisibility thing. You could just be invisible, hop in a bulldozer, and get this thing done overnight, and
You're right.
ask questions later, right?
You're right. Don't tempt
Nobody
me.
would
Runaway
ever know.
bulldozer.
Don't tempt me.
Who is what's your best New Orleans Saints memory?
Oh gosh.
Oh my God, you'll never believe this. So when I was a kid back in elementary school, they would give free tickets to the kids. And I remember getting a pair of white go-go boots that I loved. So my class went to the Saints game and I wore those white go-go boots to the
Oh,
game.
nice.
And that is my fondest memory. I'm a girl.
I love it. I tell them all the time, I'm like, why do we always got to ask questions about the sports ball? But I like the go. It's
Exactly.
about the outfit.
It was
I
about
don't
the
mind going.
outfit.
I like the outfits. I like going because there's
Exactly.
hot dogs and beer. I don't. The rest
Well,
of the
that's
stuff's just-
probably back in the days when the Saints fans were wearing paper bags over their head.
Yeah,
and
with
they
the
were
Aints.
come
We
on.
were
we
the
called the
Aints.
Aints. Yeah.
the eighth.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll just
They were the
say
Aints
as,
last year now. Bringing
Well,
it back.
as a Falcons fan, that didn't bother me that
Oh,
much. So
a
that's good.
Falcon.
and I'll say that as a Rams fan from 3 years ago, clearly that was not pass interference at all. So that was now Jess will have to educate you on that really critical play that went the direction of my team that set him to the Super Bowl. So we lost though. So there you go.
Oh, I'm so
Anyway.
glad you said Super Bowl. Now I know we're talking about football.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
there you
You know,
go.
if I can label the team with what sport it is, I'm doing great. I'm
It's a
doing
banner
good.
day. Yeah. It's a banner
I
day.
feel you just about that. It's
This-
just that,
this- The Saints are a hockey team, by the way, but they play football. It's really bizarre, Jess, but we won't get into it.
Listen, do
Yeah.
you all know why I really don't, I like football in particular is a problem is because it happens on Sundays. And on Sunday after I am tired, I have gone to church, I have had to
Yep.
cook, and I
Yep.
just want to take a nap. And y'all got to watch football? I mean, it just sounds
It's
too
hard.
much.
It's hard work sitting on a couch watching a square, right? Like I know it's really difficult.
I don't
so-
like it.
Anyway, on that note, Amy Stelly, we're going to call that an episode. We can't thank you enough for your time. It has been a
Oh.
joy. I appreciate your hard work. Man, just an inspiration. And I hope more and more people continue to hear your story and do similar wonderful things. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And I want to say one thing when you come to New
Sure.
Orleans, we don't drink here, we drank.
Of course you do.
It's all about the drink.
All right.
right.
Well, duly noted, audience. Hopefully you got that advice and we'll take it
Yes.
as well. So, all right. Thank you, Amy. So to our listener, a reminder real quick, hit up our website, www.theplantingcommissionpodcast.com. Give us a like, give us a subscription, and leave us a note. We love it. We thank you. So, commissioners, I need a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All right. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you both. And thank you, Amy, our fantastic guest. And we'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Commissioner Danley here. Would you like to see more? Hear more? Well, we got you covered. Go to our website, www.theplantingcommissionpodcast.com. It's got everything you want. Guests, yep, past episodes, the video, the audio, even our whiskey pairing, links to everything about all the people we've had on, books, websites, you name it. It's unbelievable. If you want to reach out to us, please. We'd be more than happy to chat. You can email us, planningcommissionpodcast@gmail.com. You want to tweet at us? Go for it, @planningcommish. We're also on YouTube with the Planning Commission Podcast channel, Facebook. Heck, send us a carrier pigeon if you need to. We'd love to hear from you about ideas, guests, you name it. Thank you for listening. We appreciate it. We'll keep doing our thing. You keep doing yours. Have a good one.